They'll blanket you in Wi-Fi and profit off the radiation. Congregation collecting the people for that Satan. I keeps it blazing, cause I can read between the lines. I ain't blind, we unwind what they're really saying. Genetically modify what you're tasting. Loan you that cottage promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Programmed to crave the basics. Keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed, disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of own nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
So sweet, eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome to your Tuesday night Rogueways. Elite pedophiles, cyber pandemic. That's what we're talking about today. I already messed up because they're not elite, actually. They are just the psychopath class. And the psychopath class tend to be pedophiles. They tend to like to rape little children. No offense to anybody out there. We should all be offended, actually. Let's take offense to that. Let's try to stop that. And those pedophiles have so many things in store for us. We're going to revisit some things that we've been covering whenever I get these one-on-one. That's not the right way to describe it. The Just Me episodes. Whenever we get those, we've been revisiting a few things about the experimental medication that some people are taking around the world. I hear it's actually not many. I hear the WHO, I believe, had to come out and say it's only 3 out of 10 people, and that makes me very happy. Sad for those 3 out of 10, but super happy for 7 out of 10 people who were smart enough to not take an experimental medication that is genetically altering them forever. Anyways, those psychopaths are up to a lot. There's things that have already started coming down the pipeline that we've been talking about for a while here on Rogueways, but we're just going to check in with those things and take the pulse and see some of the programming so that we can see through it. And then we're also going to talk about what to do, as always. So it is good to see you all here. We got Johnny, Angus, Mateo, Water Bottle, Vanguard of Truth, Presto Wind, and more in the YouTube chat. And we've got Logan and Aaron over in the Rockfin chat. I am going to have to shut off the YouTube version soon, but it will continue on Rockfin. It's already on Rockfin, and it will continue there for the entirety of the show. So if you want to see this live uninterrupted, then head over to Rockfin now. The link is right below this video, straight to the live stream that's already going on Rockfin, or you can also just go to rockfin.com/rogueways and find this to be the pinned video at the top that you'll just click on and start watching. You don't need to pay for this. It's free. It's just a different platform that doesn't censor. So please head over now. And if you would like to become a supporter, oh, how I appreciate you and love you. Thank you to the supporters out there. You just got a free episode of the June tarot reading. If you want to look ahead at what's in store for June, go into the economic, the physical health, the mental, emotional health, the romantic situation for June, the social situation, and the spiritual, and then get a final message. And it just gives us a nice look ahead every single month. It's pretty darn accurate, as would be expected by me, at least. For those of you who aren't into tarot, maybe it would be less expected, but it's generally pretty amazingly right on. And so go check it out. If you're a supporter, you can see that on locals.com, rogue.locals.com, or you can see it over on Rockfin. Either way, whether you're subscribing on one or both. And so again, thank you to all the supporters out there. 100% of the people who are on YouTube right now should head over to Rockfin if you're not already there, because like I said, as soon as I realize we're about to talk about something that YouTube will delete my channel for, then we're gonna just be on Rockfin after that. So, and you can always hear this on the podcast, of course. All you thousands of podcast listeners out there who never show up to the live chat and never see the video version of this show, I love you too. I always know you're there listening. I appreciate your support as well. If you ever want to support the show, it is a free podcast, so if you want to just kick a few bucks here or there my way, you can always go to paypal.me/Corey Sharman, or just head to rogueways.org and find something you like and buy it and support it. Support what you love before it goes away. So, Gordon Hamill's also in the house here. Nice to see you, Gordon, as always. And we're just going to hop into things now. Lots of hopping in springtime. So over here, I always like to remind you guys of the site. It is rogueways.org. Recently, I wrote this piece, Soul Travels Rising. I read a lot of little pieces, little essays, little vignettes, little looks into life. Often they are sacred and profound. Sometimes they are whimsical and irreverent. There's all kinds of stuff here, but this is just an example of one. What I really want to draw your attention to is my most recent book release, and that is All Endings Are Beginnings. This book is super awesome. It's just a super inspirational, very deep, channeled piece for you to flip to any page if you want to just do it that way and just get kind of an Oracle God shot for the day. Or if you want to read it, it's a good bathroom book. It's all kinds of things. So check that out. It's a super beautiful book. And then one more thing I want to draw your attention to is that coming up very soon, in the shop section, if you click on consults and courses, the One Day of Brightness will be the first product you see. And the One Day of Brightness Summer Solstice is coming up. It's just around the corner. There are some seats left for you if you're interested in coming. We already have a bunch of people who are signed up and ready to go. We do it from about 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We went very, very long the first time. We went a little bit long the second time. Who knows how long we'll go this time. You can come to all or part of it. You can hop in and out if you need to. It is the day before Father's Day, the day before the summer solstice, and that's the 19th of June. And we are celebrating the summer solstice and the sun's height, of the sun's energy, the longest day of the year before things pass the ecliptic line. And we do all kinds of spiritual upliftment that day. We get spiritual communications from our allies and guides and ancestors sometimes. We have meditations. We learn new things. We learn new techniques. We learn new tactics. But mostly we connect and we uplift each other. And it really is something special. If you haven't experienced sort of spiritual work in a group setting, then you might not really understand how much more emphasized and advanced your own skills and abilities get in that setting. And so especially if you're someone working towards unlocking your channels and your own path work, then this is a really great choice for you. There's all kinds of things that can come up that day that we can end up doing. We all kind of have like a lot of tools in our handbag that we pull out depending on how things go in the mood. And so we don't have like a list of absolutes. Instead, we have three really awesome spiritual practitioners and masters who are going to present with us. Myself, I don't call myself a master, but I do this work. This is what I've done my whole life. And so you could say that if you want. But anyway, so that gives you four really pretty profoundly awesome people to help guide and uplift the activities that day. So it's going to be rad. Anybody who's been to the previous ones knows that they walked away with a lot more than they bargained for, and it was a lot more than they expected. Everybody says that 100% of the time. So I expect it to be the same this time, and I hope to see you there. And now we'll get into the meat of the day. Oh, let me just throw that link out for anybody who might not have grabbed theirs yet. Nice to see you all hopped over to Rockfin. Not even sure if anybody's left on YouTube. Looks like Love in the Midst you might be. If you want to hop over to Rockfin, we're probably going to shut off the YouTube feed pretty quick here. I think I can get away with talking about this. We'll see. I don't know. But anyway, this is really disturbing. You may have seen this. It's been making the rounds because it's pretty shocking. And it's basically that the UNICEF, and UNICEF we know UNICEF is the UN's branch of this children's, fund and children's work that they do, whatever, worldwide, especially in places of chaos and trauma, which are the easiest pickings for pedophiles and all kinds of predators. These is the type of situations that these people look for. They're like, how can I get children, especially vulnerable children, alone and under my command and under my power? Oh, look, UNICEF. And so UNICEF is plagued by, there was one report that said something like 60,000 rapes had happened under UNICEF's, I'm just losing the word. You know what I mean? Under their watch. And so that's disturbing enough. UNICEF is already a very disturbing organization. People who don't look very deeply think, oh yeah, it's like a children's fund and it's the UN and so it's great. They're for every child. Like this must be so good. And then you look even slightly under the surface, and there's no conspiracy theory about it. There are internal documents, there are court cases, there's evidence, there's all of this. It's admitted openly that all of these rapes and all of these horrible abuses happen under their watch. And so there's nothing, outside. It's awful, it's horrifying, but this is just known. This is known that this happens. It's known by anyone who looks. Most people don't. Anyways, now even more disturbingly than that, UNICEF has, they do their little reports. All these government agencies and, even NGOs do these reports, and they have to look into their own tactics and how are they affecting kids and how are they, whatever. Every stupid organization does this. And so their own report on themselves and on children in general has said that pornography isn't harmful to children always. And just that is so ridiculous. I want to thank Knots of Mayhem and Aaron for tips today. Thank you so much for the tips. The tips really keep the show going. I appreciate it so much. You guys are awesome. And so pornography is apparently no longer bad. And we see this coming. Anybody who's been paying attention for very long has seen this exact agenda unroll over years and years and years. The further and further sexualization of children and the more and more sort of accepting by the public. And it's unfortunately true, not to in any way harm or cast shade on, actual gay and lesbian and trans people. But it's unfortunately true that sort of unfolding in the public eye and all of the celebration of that, that's great, cool, who cares? But unfortunately, that has also paved the way for a lot of this pedophilia-related agenda unfurling. Because they make similar arguments, and it's not gay people's fault. And most gay people are like most any people, not enjoying pedophilia and people in power being disgusting, horrible freaks. Obviously, right? That's obviously, it should go without saying, but I always am very clear in case people are very ignorant and can't understand the words that I'm saying and the ideas I'm putting across. But unfortunately, there is some alignment with that, the LGBTQ movement and this unfortunate pedophilia and the sexualization of children agenda. So that's just been happening. So we've been seeing it, but this is just pretty, when it's coming from a somewhat governmental agency and it's in a report, then it's official. And we look at all these people who are not very critically thinking. And if they have a report or if they have a study, it doesn't matter if that study or that report is done well. It doesn't matter who funded it or whatever. It just that it exists, then they'll just run with it and say this is now fact. And the correct thing to do if we're critical thinkers is to look at anything like that and say, well, there's one group or one organization or one scientist or one lab. There's one view of it. That's one piece, right? And we take it with a ton of salt, no matter what it is, no matter what it's coming from. But they do things like this on purpose to try and just get it out there more and more, right? Remember when we saw this woman who was arguing, it was a TED Talk or whatever, and she was like, oh, just this poor pedophile, and their orientation is that they love children, and it's just like your orientation is that you like men or you like women. I'm like, whoa. No, that is not the same as having sexual attraction to other adults. There's nothing similar about it except that you're associating it with sexual pleasure. And that's disgusting. There's something wrong with you. Just like if you were going to go out and have sex with an animal, there's something wrong with you. It's not okay. Our society has pretty consistently condemned it throughout all of history. But here they are trying to normalize it, right? We saw that come out. We've seen a lot of unfortunate things come out saying pedophilia is just an orientation. And we're just getting closer and closer to them normalizing this. And for really, unfortunately, unintentionally ignorant people, which is a lot of people, to accept that. Because as we've seen, if you're able to be criticized to be an unaccepting person who's a bigot or racist or homophobic or whatever, then you're a bad person. And so it works. People have, given up their morals and their standards for these types of things because they don't want to be called names. So we just see that over and over again. And here we see UNICEF putting out this report that pornography doesn't always harm children. It's not always bad, actually. There might be some porn that's great for children. It's really fucked up. What's funny is that all these people looked at it and now Even though they had this report, the Digital Age Assurance Tools and Children's Rights Online Across the Globe, they deleted it. So I clicked and it's gone. This is UNICEF's actual site, unicef.org/media, blah, blah, blah. It should be a PDF. It should be the exact report that they put out on their site, and it's gone, right? So, of course, I went to the Wayback Machine, and here it is. It's still there. I downloaded it. I have it. Here, I'm going to share this link with you in case you want to share it with others. It's not gone. Nothing's ever gone from the internet. It just can be hidden sometimes. So that's there for you to look at. So the Digital Age Assurance Tools and Children's Rights Online Across the Globe. And let's see. Let's see if we can find pornography. It's unlikely they prevent children from accessing pornography completely. The goal is to prevent children from viewing pornography online in any form. It's not clear that preventing children from visiting commercial pornography websites through age verification would be a successful strategy. All right. I mean, that's probably true. Is that it? Oh, no. There's more. Oh, they're just not going to pop me down to it? I want to get to the... I want to get to the point where I want to find the part where they actually say it's not that bad. Okay. So they're saying from a rights perspective, like your right is to have this or that, right? From a rights perspective, extreme care would be needed to avoid excluding children from sexual and reproductive health information online. So they're under the guise of saying, well, we can't restrict all sexual content from children because then they wouldn't be able to learn sex ed. So we should not really focus on restricting content like that from children. We should just kind of let them have it because otherwise we might be harming them. They have the right to view this. It is questionable whether age assurance tools are an appropriate response to pornography that depicts extreme violence or violence against women, both of which can arguably be considered harmful for viewers of all ages. I mean, that's reasonable too. That's actually true too. I want to get to the part where they are saying that it doesn't always harm children. Pornhub, X videos have been criticized for not doing enough about child sex abuse. That's true. And they've also been criticized for not doing enough about adult sex abuse. Just sex abuse in general. So they need to verify their identity and their age. What does the existing regulation have with respect to age assurance online? Who cares? I want to see the part that says that pornography is not always bad. Age verification is a nascent field, so a new field. Effectiveness of age verification. I mean, it's really, if you've seen sites that are like, are you 18? You're like, yeah, I totally am. How would they know? So I think that's part of what they're talking about here, is that that's kind of stupid. It also may disproportionately affect some children by restricting them from sex education. It's just interesting, too, that they're like, well, they have the right to sex education, which I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't agree. I don't think children have the right. Traditionally, in most societies, children don't actually have rights per se. And I know that sounds fucked up, but basically your parents have the rights for you when you're a child. And it's then their job to act appropriately and care for you and, protect you via their rights. It's just traditionally how things go, whether we like it or not. And I kind of think it's for a good reason. And this is part of why. Otherwise, you start getting to the point where you're like, kids have the right to porn. And as a parent, you can't stop them from that. And then in school, we're going to give them porn, right? Or you could say things like, oh, kids have a right to get experimental medication injected into them at school without parental consent, and the parents can't say anything about that. So it's a dangerous line of thinking to say that children have rights, unfortunately. And I know that sounds weird, but hopefully you listened to my whole statement and understand what I'm saying. I obviously think children are humans and should, not be beaten and be taken care of and loved and all of that. But what about you saying that it doesn't always harm children? And I mean, they wouldn't have deleted it off of their site, and I wouldn't have had to go to the Wayback Machine to find it unless there was something in it that was very questionable. Children's rights to access information, to participation, and freedom of expression should be protected at all times, as well as their rights to privacy and data protection. Children's access to spaces and content should not be restricted unless it's truly necessary to do so to prevent harm on the basis of evidence. Safety and privacy should be prioritized over blocking children's access. See, there's somewhere in here where they say it's not always harmful and therefore it shouldn't be blocked. Especially when they say, like, it should be based on evidence. That's one of their key reasons for being able to argue that it's not always harmful, because there's not enough evidence that it is. You think about what this means is they're saying no one has proven that porn harms children, and so we can't say that it does. But in order to prove it, what would you have to do? You'd have to get a bunch of kids, and you'd have to expose them to this and then prove that that is what then did some harm, right? And that'd be unethical and fucked up to begin with, obviously. So no, there's not going to be evidence, but the absence of evidence is not equal to evidence of absence. That's true. So we don't, just saying the evidence doesn't exist doesn't mean that it's just not true. And actually, there is a lot of evidence that does show that pornography is very negative for young people and developing people. The evidence of potential harm. But okay, I guess we didn't find the exact quote in this, but you can find it. I gave you the link to that document, and I know it's in here. I've seen the screenshots and the quotes from it, and I thought it'd be easier to find than it was. But again, they deleted this from their site. So people, child sex abuse materials. Sorry, I just saw this and I need to look at it real quick. They're talking about taking stuff down if it looks like kids are in it. They're flagging images that seem like, I mean, they've had the AI ability to identify whether or not it's a child in a video or a picture for who knows how many years. And they're like, oh, we're starting to wonder if we could do that. I'm like, go fuck yourself. Anyway, somewhere in here, it also has the part. Ooh, is this it? I don't know, dude. Somewhere in here. So, anyways, I think it's fucked up that UNICEF, the just heavy rapists of people in general. It's not just kids either. They're like people who work for them were getting raped, and it's just so fucked up. Anyways, this organization comes out and is like, all right, we might have to like restrict in some ways, but it's going to be hard because we also have to make sure that kids have the right to access this stuff that other people might call porn, and we're not even really sure it harms them anyways, so whatever. And then people were like, hey, actually pornography is bad for children. And they were like, oops, let's delete that. But it's like this always, right? They're like testing the waters. They're like, what can we get away with? Can we have a movie called Cuties in which, very young girls hump the floor and talk about sex and get very sexualized during the show, and then put it out on Netflix and have people defend it even as art? And the answer was yes. And they're like, okay, well, can we put out a study that says, or a report that says that kids should have the right to access pornography because we're not even sure that it's harmful to them? And apparently the answer was no, because they had to delete it. So it's interesting to see if they've like dipped their toe in and what people allow. But something else that has also been making the rounds as something very disturbing is that first graders are like 5, 6, maybe 7 years old, generally speaking. So think about the 5, 6, and 7-year-old kids you've known. They are shown these sex education videos. It's all cartoons, very child friendly. Look, there's a chicken. And they're shown these videos and, some of it seems kind of cool. They're saying like you should have consent, you should give consent if people are going to touch you and people are going to hug you or whatever. And I think that's cool. I think there's kids who aren't necessarily taught that like no one gets to just grab you and hug you and like tickle you. And some adults are weird and they do that to kids that are not their own. And I'm like, I'm not really cool with that. So I think it's cool to teach little kids about consent and things like that. And I remember when I was in first grade or so and they were talking about, like your bathing suit area and no one but your parents should touch you there. And even then it should be normal. I don't know. I don't remember how they presented it, but I remember learning about it. So that's cool. But what's interesting is I saw little pieces of this. I'm not going to play because then I always get a copyright strike. And they were showing that, the adult in this video is telling the kids like, oh, when your penis gets hard and it feels good and you touch it, like you can touch it and it feels good. And like, I'm like, whoa, like why? Okay, kids touch themselves and it feels good. That's why they touch themselves. Like, I get it. And, I have this very dear friend who handled it by, it starts usually when they're around 2 or so. Their hands start being in their pants a lot and whatever. And so she just would say, oh, if you're going to do that, that's cool, but just go in your bedroom. It's a private thing, go be in your bedroom for that. And I was like, that's cool because it's respecting. There's no shame. It's like, but you're also like are teaching them like you can't just like rub yourself in public because that's like people get uncomfortable or whatever. And I'm not opposed to teaching kids what their genitalia is called or, acknowledging that it might feel neat and then also telling them how to handle it appropriately. Like that's cool. My problem is why the fuck would this be happening in a school? No school should be talking to my child about whether their genitals feel good or not. That seems fucked up to me. This seems like a huge boundary crossing. A huge boundary. We're talking about like, don't let strangers touch you in your bathing suit area. Well, don't let strangers talk to you about the pleasure you may or may not feel in your bathing suit area, right? Like, does that not seem logical? It seems very logical to me that you would not put up with that would be a huge boundary invasion. But it's weird because schools have this ideology, and I saw it the whole time I was training to be a teacher and the whole time I was teaching, that we have to assume that parents are basically going to never interact with their children at all, and therefore we have to build their children up from scratch, and therefore we have to teach them literally everything a parent would. And there's some part of you that's like, yeah, there's going to be some kids like that. But most of the time, it's not like that. And it's not your job, actually, unless you knew for sure that kid literally had no parents or whatever. And even then, you'd tread lightly, dude. It's not your kid. It's weird. It seems weird to me. It seems like one more step of what we were just talking about this like pedophilia becoming more and more acceptable, engaging with children in sexual ways, slightly at least sexualized ways, or creating films about very sexualized children and having the world defend their existence on Netflix. All of those things are just little pieces of the agenda, just pushing further and further and further. Anyway, the little girl character says, sometimes when I'm in my bath or when mom puts me to bed, I like to touch my vulva. I'm pretty sure, I'm not opposed, again, to teaching children the correct words, but I'm pretty sure a kid wouldn't say that. It's really fucking weird. And it's, you have a clitoris there, Kayla. That probably feels good to touch the same way Keith's penis feels good when he touches it. Like, why would you be needing to say this to a child? They already fucking know. It's like saying, like, oh, eating berries is enjoyable for your taste buds. And, like, but at least that's acceptable conversation and topic for you to talk about with people outside of your private circle of family or whatever. But like, why? They already know strawberries taste good. You don't need to tell them. There's no need for them to learn this. It's just fucking a boundary invasion. It's just another step of, and this is by the way, like a canned curriculum is what we call it. When it's just like, this is your sex ed curriculum. Someone else made it. They hand it to you and you just like press play and like let it go. And you don't even know yourself why each slide or each moment was included or what the goal is for learning or any of it. Because you don't even have to be a teacher to do half this shit. You just need to be a warm body that can like press play and pass out papers and watch kids get degraded by this agenda. Anyways, so a lot of parents learned this Probably because their kids came home and were like, am I supposed to touch my vulva? And they were like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, probably that's what happened. So, also, I'm going to point out that these lessons for these 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds have included things about gender assignment and gender identity and expression. Which just, yeah, like this quote says, this is just pure indoctrination. A 5, 6, and 7-year-old child has no reason to understand any of those things. If they have a different gender or gender identity, it just will express at some point. No one needs to help it out of them. It just seems like grooming. It seems like training. It seems like leading the client. And there's just no point for this. There's no point. Except to invade boundaries and make it more and more acceptable to sexualize young kids. So that's happening. This is the actual curriculum here. It's called Amaze. And it's all just kids and adults and cartoons and all kinds of things. And like, again, cool. If you're a homeschooler and you're like, I kind of wanted some sex education curriculum, like here this is. This is on YouTube Kids, by the way, I have heard. So here's one more reason, if you didn't already know, to like keep every child you know away from YouTube Kids. Full of way worse shit than this. This is like the lightest degradation on YouTube Kids. There's shit on YouTube Kids that's literally about like pee and poo play sexually. Like, it's fucked up. YouTube Kids is fucked up. People report it all the time and it never gets erased. We've talked about it before on Rogueways. So yeah, this again, and we always have the same arguments, right? Well, we have to provide sex ed because there's like these backwards people who don't think you should talk to kids about sex at all. And I'm like, yeah, I guess. Again, I'm like, I don't really think it's my business to tell someone else when their child should talk to them about sex, if ever, or how to do it. It's none of my business, actually. It would become my business if they were just physically beating the shit out of their kids. If I could somehow prove that they were emotionally abusing them, then maybe that would become my business, you know, but like what you teach your child and the information they're exposed to, it's none of my business. That's your child. It's not mine. I don't know. It's not. But you can see also in that some level of the agenda, right? Where, oh, these people aren't doing a good enough job educating their kids to our standards. And so we're going to just forcefully take their kids, or we're going to force them to expose their kids to this so that we can't take their kids. You know what I mean? Instead of taking their kids. That's the argument. That's the slope that the argument has been rolling down for many years. And really well-intentioned people back it up, because they really do believe it prevents rape and it prevents teen pregnancy and, you know, it's just good for kids and all this. And I'm like, I understand why people think that. The evidence does not actually seem to back most of those ideas up. And when you really get to the principle of it and you ask yourself, should somebody outside of my family be entitled to and have like the right to expose my child to whatever sexual content they want and call it sexual education? No. Where does that end? You know, I don't want to know where it ends. I know where they want it to end. I'm going to say what's up to James Beck in the chat. And, yep. Nice to see you guys. So again, it's not illogical to then also look at the other ways in which a very liberal tendency also tends to support and defend pedophilia at various levels. Some of it, again, is like really well-intentioned. And I really want all of us to remember that there's a lot of actually very deeply good people who really believe they're doing the right thing, God bless them, and aren't trying to like harbor pedophilia or like create safe places for pedophilia. It's really true. I've seen it in my own life. I have friends who are counselors who work with pedophiles, and they have a lot of compassion for them, and I can understand it. Technically. And I also want every pedophile to literally be murdered. I think that would be great. Because it is really dangerous. There's people who have come into various groups that I've run and been a part of and have been like, hey, you guys, what do you guys think about like that pedophiles is an orientation or whatever? I'm like, dude, no, pedophilia is not an orientation. It's a fucked up twisting of your soul that told you that you should have sex with a child. who cannot consent to that. No matter what you tell yourself delusionally, a child cannot, because a child cannot possibly understand what's actually happening or involved in that. And they're defending that, like that TED Talk, like there's just people all over who are defending it. And so this is an interesting article I just happened upon about why the left keeps sticking up for pedophiles. There was this famous Salon article. We talked about it at the time, but it was, I'm a pedophile, but not a monster. And I'm like, no, if you're a pedophile, you're a monster, but nice try. It is full of self-pity. It is full of like, oh, you can't understand what it's like. You can't control what you're attracted to. And I go, yeah, no, you can actually. You actually can. You can't. You may feel like you can't because you've been giving into it for so long that it's now a habit and you feel like it's a part of you. But the rest of us can. I can absolutely. Even if I look at, I'm attracted to men in general. Even if I look at a man and he's like chiseled and I'm like, oh yeah, like technically I can now, maybe when I was younger it was a lot harder even, right? But now I can look at them and be like, I mean, yeah, I can see why that would be sexually appealing for some people, but in no way now, knowing what I know now about myself, the universe, sexuality, feminine and masculine energy, and the way it comes together, in no way does that make me in any way sexually attracted, actually. I just can look and say, like, aesthetically, that's pleasing. Proportionally, whatever, it's cool. But I don't become sexually aroused or, like, uncontrollably, like, attracted, and I no longer understand the argument that people can't control those types of things. You absolutely can. Anyways, some people think you can't, and they believe pedophilia is an orientation, and so they start to defend it. Sarah Nyberg is one of these commentators, and people have rallied around them because they call themselves a transsexual pedophile. I don't know how you can defend it, but people do. Back, and they just go through some of the history of this, right? So back, it's disgusting. Back a while ago, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, made famous again by South Park, and I have to say that I thought it was not real. I thought it was just a South Park joke, and then it took people a lot of convincing to get me to understand that it was a real thing, because I couldn't understand how there could be an organization of people who openly want to rape children without everyone just murdering them. And yet it exists. Well, Allen Ginsberg, famous beat poet, supported them openly. There was PI, the Pedophile Information Exchange, which is fucking gross too when you think about how they use food as code words for their disgusting proclivities. And people defended that. And it's all these like labor parties or left-wing sort of political organizations or members that they're showing have defended these things. And they show too how the LGBTQ movement in general has had to like really over and over again stress that they do not support pedophilia. And I get it, but those people are going to keep trying to attach themselves to it because they're going to use the similar types of arguments like, oh, it's not our fault. You can't help how you're born. You can't help who you're attracted to. Why won't society accept us? Blah, blah, blah. Which is unfortunate. People said it was going to happen, and it did. It's not gay people's fault. It's just people saw their in. They're like, ooh, if the lesbians and gays used to not be accepted and they use these tactics, we can try it too. That's just how psychopathy works. So yeah, I mean, obviously, as this article was pointing out, pedophiles are left, right, center, and everything in between because pedophiles are just sick fucks and they don't have a political organization. They're just pointing out how left-wing, if there's going to be support and defense for pedophiles and pedophile-related content, it is always coming from the left wing. It's very interesting to note, and it's very obvious to understand why. The left is really concerned with every single human feeling fantastic about themselves, no matter who they are, and also trying to jump on anything that they think can get them political power. So if they think the next thing is going to be fucking NAMBLA, then they'll probably back it up, right? I don't know. What is this? Meet the pedophiles who mean well. a group of virtuous pedophiles who resolve to never have sex with children. Like, I'm supposed to give you some kind of credit for not raping kids? Go fuck yourself. Like, really go die. Seriously, pray to God that you just have an aneurysm and die. Wouldn't it be so cool if you could just aneurysm like anybody? I would aneurysm all pedophiles for sure. Whether they were virtuous pedophiles or not, like, you're just dead now. That's too bad. You fucked this life up. Try again. People argue that it should be treated as a medical issue rather than a moral one. You know, and I'll tell you that people argue those types of things all the time. They're like, oh, we have to give them therapy and we have to help them, whatever. And there's even these like medications that sort of chemically castrate people and make it so that it would be very difficult to have any sort of sexual arousal. And it tends to go that when that happens, if those people do offend again, that this time they tend to just torture. Because it turns out that they're not actually attracted to children. They're attracted to power and controlling another individual completely without any sort of judgment or defense being mounted against them. That turns out to be what they're actually attracted to. Like, surprise. And so that's what happens. It's they may not rape a child again, but they will find some way to have their sick fucking psychopathy be played out in the world. Which is why they should just die. But yeah, they point out how, you know, this whole Muslim and Islamist sort of idea that if you have, there's a lot of things going on. One of them is this idea in a lot of Muslim and Islamic sort of cultures that you're not gay if you're on top. That's a thing. And also you're not gay and you're not cheating. Okay, you're not cheating on your wife if you have sex with a man. And you're not gay if you're the top. So that's a thing that happens a lot. Yeah, having lived in Muslim countries, it's like really way more than you would think. So that happens. And there's also the idea that if you have sex with a child, it's not cheating and it's not wrong or whatever. So that also happens. That may happen a lot less than the other, for sure, but it happens. And so we've seen this a lot in a lot of countries where, like France and the UK, where a lot of Muslim and Islamic people have come in to that country, that a lot of children have been raped. And a lot of people, especially on the left, have covered it up because they don't want to be called anti-Islamic or anti-Muslim. And so instead of helping children not get raped, or girls, or young women, or boys, they just like, no, that's just their culture, we can't like attack it. And it's like this cultural relativism is what it's called. When you say like, oh, it's wrong in our society, but in their culture it's okay, that's part of their culture. And that's another thing that comes from the left, is this cultural relativism, this idea that you have to respect other people's cultures no matter what. Well, I don't think so. Genital mutilation is wrong no matter your culture. Rape is wrong no matter your culture. Murder is generally wrong no matter your culture. So it's just interesting to see how much the left has over and over again defended even the most heinous of things because of their, I don't know, fear of being called an ism, an ist, or their desire to really like make every single human feel supported and accepted. Just a lot of bullshit. But yes, again, as this article pointed out, as I said before, is absolutely true, is pedophilia has no political boundaries. And all kinds of people are pedophiles. Tends to be a lot of our powerful people, a lot of our politicians, a lot of our, you know, high-ups in the church and all this, like a lot of them are pedophiles. And this has been true throughout history. And they don't have a political side. It just is true that if someone's defending them or helping them, it tends to be the left. Very interesting. So, Illuminati Reloaded, Autumn Houston, nice to see you guys. I have said earlier, in case you weren't here, that we're about to switch over to Rockfin only. The link is just below you. If you want to come over now, then you'll just be there and have uninterrupted flow. So head over there. Yeah, okay, and this was another thing that I saw, which was very disturbing, which was normalizing pedophilia, abolishing the age of consent. And they were talking about how the DSM-5, which is, the DSM is like anybody who's into psychiatry or a counselor, or like you'll hear psychobabble people including me sometimes, talk about the DSM-5 because it's like the Bible of mental illness. The soft science of psychology has this Bible, and it's as close to you can get as being like official, or, you know, it's just, I could do like a whole episode on this fucking book, but anyways, it's accepted as like the end all be all of like what is true, especially about mental illness, which is often very difficult to define the various types of mental illness and the symptoms of it, and like when it is and when it is not pathological and all of these things. DSM-5 tries to solve that by having this Bible of diagnoses. And so yeah, because of pedophilia advocacy groups, the APA, the American Physicians Association, has distinguished between pedophilic disorder and pedophilic orientation. That's really all we need to grab from this article. We just need to know that as soon as the DSM-5 came out, which was what? This article is 2013, so I remember it was somewhere around then that DSM-5 came out. It just means it's the 5th version of this, by the way. And so each version, they change a few more things, and it's almost always in line with whatever agendas. And so if you can identify the changes, you can kind of see like what's coming for the next decade or so. So it's interesting. But the APA in this version of the DSM-5 has said that there is pedophilic disorder, and that's when it's like pathological or something wrong with you, you rape kids or whatever. And then there's pedophilic orientation, which is just like, you know, it's not your fault. You're a virtuous pedophile who's like not gonna fuck kids. It's fucking psycho. The fact that you could even pretend those are two different things is fucking psycho to me. Like there's something fucking wrong with the people who did this. And so that's a thing that exists. And that means that all of our psychiatrists, all of our sociologists, all of our counselors, all of our people who deal with any of that side of things, all of them have to use this as their, you know, like prime source of information and diagnoses. So yeah, that's fucked. That is fucked up. DSM-5 sounds like a hardcore gang, James Beck says. Lloyd Tucker Carlson, RBG wanted to lower the age of consent to 10 or 12. Well, I did an episode on that. It seemed, what I found did not seem to indicate that that was true. So I do not agree. She cited something in which someone else was saying something like that, but the reason she cited it was literally just to show gender neutral language, and the whole argument was just about whether or not they should use gender neutral language. So I think that's actually a misunderstood, I don't know, it was presented by someone and they didn't look very deeply. But by all means, if someone has actual evidence that I'm wrong and that she did do that, please supply it to me, because some episode of Rogue some time ago, I seemed to disprove that. So, yeah, I don't know. And then they go into this kind of history of, again, other aspects of like Kinsey and other sexologists seeming to normalize pedophilia and pedophilia-related behavior. So, and like getting rid of the age of consent and yeah, the sexual revolutionary is like, it's interesting because it's like, well, maybe we did have too much sexual repression, and maybe it is cool that people kind of opened up and stopped wearing bras. I don't really fucking care. But if a part of that is normalizing pedophilia, then maybe we should ask, like, who actually was pushing this all, and how much of it is actually universally true? How many of the principles are true, and how much of it was just like really illogical, like offshoots of arguments that are not actually sensical. So anyways, the DSM-5 says that there is such a thing as pedophilia as an orientation, and so it makes sense that we've seen more and more of this sort of argument come out in our world. And this is interesting too. So this is Sexual Morality in the Law. It's a sort of, it's a 1978 radio transcription of a conversation in Paris between Michael Foucault. I never say shit right, so I'm sure I'm saying the name wrong. Foucault. However you say that in French. Foucault. He's a playwright, with the playwright and actor Jean Denet, and novelist, gay activist Guy Hockengull, whatever you say that, debating the idea of abolishing the age of consent laws in France. And Foucault is a famous, gender and sexuality and a philosopher. And people don't understand often that gender orientation or gender and orientation were like kind of put forward originally by him and his friends, Derrida and others, who are these philosophers at the time who were talking about sex and freedom and all of this, and that universally they seemed to advocate for pedophilia. And here's one example of it, when they argued that there shouldn't even be an age of consent. Who in their right mind could argue that there shouldn't be an age of consent? I'm just like, literally, like, what human being can look other human beings in the eye and be like, yeah, no, there shouldn't be. 2-year-olds, 5-year-olds, whatever. I get heated because I want to murder these people. And so he did that. So people don't always know that. And this is another reason why the gay, lesbian, trans community gets kind of fucked with, because they often hold him up and Derrida and these people up as sort of heroes of the movement, because they sort of opened up the conversation and like put all of this out there for the sexual revolution, and that's such a good thing for their community and their movement, whatever they think. Same with feminism and all this stuff, but they don't often know these much. They're suppressed, right? And we can see they're suppressed because this fucking very Wikipedia page is like, we're gonna delete this. We're gonna delete this from Wikipedia because we have a deletion policy, and we and we want people to not read this. Why? Because the tone or style might not reflect the right tone. It might have an excessive amount of detail that isn't like relevant. I mean, why? How many bytes of information does it cost you to leave this up? Like, so specifically you need to hide it for some reason, and probably because of this. Because if enough people realize that Derrida and Foucault all fucking advocated for child sex, for fucking pedophilia, then it might like cast a little shade on some of the shit that you guys argue, or at least point out the hypocrisy of the principles you claim to hold. Sexual freedom isn't all it's cracked up to be. And we've seen this coming for a long time. So these are just a few more details that I'm throwing onto the pot for anybody who realizes that pedophiles run the world. Where did all the children on the orphan trains come from? Abnormalcy Bias asks. It's interesting. I was just seeing this thing earlier today, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it does kind of actually, because I'm sure many of these children were raped. This thing earlier today was saying, in 1952, you could buy a native child for $10. How fucked up is that? And I was saying, yeah, it is fucked up. And that's also why my own father, who was adopted out to white people from a native tribe, probably for $10, maybe for free. And they scratched out his, they undid his history and ethnicity by putting Caucasian on the birth certificate. And the story I heard was that they paid the people who were recording all of this to do that to his birth certificate. So even his birth certificate says Caucasian. You could look at the fucking guy and you're like, he's not Caucasian at all. Like 100% of people called him Chief because he looks like a Native American, and that's all there is to it. But that was all erased, by this. And I was talking with Johnny about this today, and he's like, just like the orphan trains, right? Like, you can write anything on a birth certificate. You can write anything on a form of adoption, and you can erase any history you want. And all of these kids who were possibly passed around and taken from whatever adults disappeared or were disappeared back in those orphan train days, same thing, right? Who did they come from? No one will ever know. I don't know my tribe. My dad never found out his tribe. We have no history on that side. And there's a professor who I've long since forgotten who it is, who coined the term the lost tribe. And that's what I always say. I'm of the lost tribe. We don't have a tribe. But yeah, a lot of these native kids were also, killed and raped. There's all kinds of hideous stories about the queen snake, the queen reptile, amphibious fucking horror bitch, adrenochrome drinking hag that for some reason people like still in England. Her and her ilk have so many stories, especially in Canada, which is Crown territory, of going into these native schools where all these children were stolen and, probably raped already, and just raping them and killing them. And they're finding all these graves. And I guess it's surprising to people. Like, I guess they didn't know. But if you didn't know, now you know. these pedophiles have been everywhere, and for how long? Who knows? And like, was that even maybe part of the impetus, right? Like, let's get rid of all these adults so we can get all these kids on these trains and just have like tons of victims. It's very, very sick and disgusting. And so now we are going to transition from these pedophiles who are pedophiles and run the world and would love for us to accept pedophilia more and more and more, whether they have to put it in the curriculum to our children or argue that it's an orientation or make these other sick arguments that we should accept this for some reason instead of murdering these people. All of those pedophiles and their agendas are also deeply connected with the rest of the agendas we see, because it's the same people who are promoting them all, right? All the pedophiles at the top are the people who are creating all these simulations and these things going on in the world, such as what we have talked about in episodes like Strange Cycles. We're talking about the experimental medication and what it seems to be doing to women, and we have new evidence today to back up exactly what we thought back then. And we're also going to be revisiting the total human control episode of Rogueways, where we connected the Magneto protein, which can be created via mRNA injection that allows for remote mind control. It's not science fiction. It's a real thing. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, go watch this episode. Or listen, or whatever you do. We're going to revisit some of that. And so I'm going to turn off YouTube now. Kelly Crawford, Illuminati Reloaded, R.L. Gill, Abnormalcy Bias. If you guys are still over there chatting or watching, hop over now, because I'm about to shut it down on YouTube and be on Rockfin only. Let me give you the link one more time. Here it is in the chat. Easy as pie. Hop over. You may have to make an account if you haven't yet. It's as easy as making an account anywhere. And that is just putting in your like whatever name you want to use and an email address, I'm guessing, and a password, whatever. Come join us. We're going to have fun there. So see you there. Otherwise, people on Rockfin, I will stay with you uninterrupted, and love to all you YouTube people. Come find us over on Rockfin. Bye-bye.